for my final presentation at Flatiron, this may be familiar to those of you who came to our final showcase, but we had about 2 weeks to put together a toy project in data science using some public source data. And the first piece of advice that I give to people who are aspiring data scientists is to go to your local open data portal, find a data set that's interesting to you and is related to the place where you live. And that's really great for networking because whenever you meet recruiters, interviewers, people at meetups, they're going to want to know what you found out through your data science work that applies to their neighborhood. So it's like an automatic in, basically. And I leveraged that really hard. And yeah, and I learned a lot about DC, which was a lot of fun. So before I jump too much into how I made the project, I would like to start off by showing you what it looks like here. So let's get it loaded, hang on. Okay, well, this is the Tableau dashboard that I put together as the final result. So each of these colors represents a different cluster. Clustering is an unsupervised learning technique, so there's no right answer, which is so critical to supervised learning. Supervised learning, you pretty much need labeled data, but with clustering, the beauty of that is you don't. You can just use that as kind of a data exploration technique. And then, of course, part and parcel to that, you'll end up with kind of these results that are challenging to interpret. So we represent the clusters based on colors. And part of what I did in my presentation that you'll see here in a minute is assigning a personality to each cluster. So there's definitely a lot of human in the loop. This is unsupervised learning is more art than science. But it was a lot of fun, and I think it ended up with a helpful product. So basically, the idea of the tool is that the user could come in and they could say, okay, I'm trying to figure out where to go as a tourist in DC, and I really hate the arts. I just don't want to see anything artsy, so I will not go to the artsiest places in DC. But I'm really interested in civics, so let's see if I can slide this up. Okay. So basically, I want to go to these places that are the yellow cluster, yellow city blocks. It's a census. It's just a census designation. That's the underlying GIS area. So anyway, that's how this tool ended up working out. So you can see say I really love nature. I really want to go to the naturey places. Again, that's yellow, but also these purple ones and the brown ones. So, okay, so that's just a preview of where we're going with this tool. But I'm going to flip back now to the slides so I can explain in more detail how I did this. Okay, so as we talked about, the data comes from an open data portal. Pretty much all big cities have this. So if you don't want to do DC, you could build this for another town. Yeah, so the process of doing this. Always there's a lot of data cleaning. I used the Google Maps API. I just blew straight through that $300 credit that GCP gives you, which was really scary. So definitely read the documentation and do more. I wish I had done more research or planning, because it would have been very simple to just plug in the number of places into a spreadsheet and kind of figure out how much that would cost, but I skipped that step. So I ended up needing to run multiple batches through multiple email accounts. I don't recommend doing that. It's just a big hassle. I could have done it all right the first time and done small practice batches. Anyway, data cleaning, massive hassle. Nobody wants to hear about it. Moving on. The next step, once I had the kind of the information about each block group, was the clustering step. So again, I used the k-means clustering algorithm. And then you saw when I was in this dashboard that each block group had a score across these different categories. So I assigned the score based on a normalization of the points of interest that fell into that category. So out of 100%, how many of the points of interest, like what proportion of them were artsy points in that area? What proportion of them were naturey area, like points of interest in that area? And that's how I arrived at these scores. And then that informs this slide, like the slider bar on the left side of the screen. Okay, so kind of like there's, 3 steps. So there was some nuance that went into each step, obviously, but it was a fairly simple, straightforward project. Okay, and just in case I haven't like explicitly made this clear, the block groups of the same color, they share a similar composition. So again, out of like in terms of their personality, they share a similar composition in terms of these points of interest. Okay, here's the personalities that I described earlier. So this is just assigned by me, the data scientist, after the k-means clustering algorithm ran. We ended up with these different personas. And just to close things out, I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive on k-means. I've got like 20 seconds left, but I did want to show you this GIF because I think this is a good introduction to the algorithm. Actually, it's a fabulous introduction to the algorithm. I don't want to sell it short. Yeah, this is what your k-means clustering is doing behind the scenes. I just used the scikit-learn implementation. And that is 7 minutes, so I'll stop there. Yeah, let me know if you have questions or about either the presentation or the dashboard.
One thing I think is interesting, so you noted that you did this on Google Cloud and you kept flowing through like the credits. I think that's a big like takeaway or like learning point about using cloud services in general. Everything you do has a cost associated with it. So I think learning to like do something like with a small amount of data, and then once you get it working and doing it with a big amount of data, it's a big takeaway. I recently saw a presentation with some of our data engineers, and that's basically what they did is they took like a little bit of data, they like, saw how long it ran for and calculated how long the total set of data would take to run and then engineered from there. So I think that's a pretty important skill to learn on the cloud. I haven't done it yet, but I made that connection, which I think is cool.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandra, for emphasizing that point. That is so well said. And I think it's something that data engineers do really well in terms of needing to understand how long it'll take for a SQL query to run, for example. And yeah, that was a major learning for me out of this project, and definitely a really well phrased reiteration of that piece of advice. So thank you very much for making that point.
This is kind of a random question, but while you were doing the research and preparing to do this analysis, did you base it off of like similar analyses done in the past? Have you seen anything on like community gap analysis or assessments of like resources where they might be missing or something like that?
That's a really great question. And I hadn't thought about that potential use case for this dashboard. I mean, you can see here I have a slide on it where I just am like, oh yeah, you could use this as a tourist. I guess you would use it for city planning where you could identify gaps in resources. Okay, so maybe I'm not giving my past self enough credit. But yeah, that's a beautiful use case for this type of tool. I mean, maybe I'm like just naive to other people having done this exact same project, but I mean, I think it's pretty unique. I hadn't seen one that's like this when I started it. I just really loved Tableau. That was definitely my like entry point to data science. So I wanted to use that tool for my final project because I knew that it's highly performant in terms of its mapping capabilities. But yeah, if you guys see something similar out there, like I would love to see it because I think this is kind of like a cool idea and I'd be really curious to see how other people would use it.